The British Broadcasting Corporation loves its police procedurals, like, really loves them, possibly to its own detriment. And the BBC also hates the police. It keeps throwing its coppers into the bleakest, most grimy situations, and it's been doing it a lot longer than the rest of the world. BBC coppers aren't jaded film noir smokers with a glib line and a leggy dame. No, instead they have troubled family lives, mountains of bureaucracy, and a beard a little too long to be called a 5 o'clock shadow, but also not long enough to be called a real homeless person beard. You usually know what you're getting into when you hear the phrase British crime drama. Broadchurch is a British crime drama. You watch that and you don't really have to watch another one. Unless Peter Capaldi's in it. He plays the same character in everything, but it's usually pretty great. He has Malcolm Tucker, the Doctor, and then Sketchy Guy getting interviewed. Your eyes will kind of glaze over when you see the latest one of these shows getting pumped out. It's rare they even try to do or say anything besides try to provide a character actor the chance of that big crying scene. But occasionally, this tired format can splutter to life in the operating table, gasping and rolling its eyes. I mean, trying to solve a crime does have that basic hook that has given us 400 series of NCIS. And it's also why every middle-aged woman with a bedroom with a 12-year-old girl has themselves a YouTube channel. Of course, sometimes the reason is, well, loofah.
How do you turn it on? Turn it on! Turn it on! Go on. There you go, there you go. Don't move.
I will one day talk about loofah. I've got a lot to say about loofah. Good things, yes. Perhaps not good things the creative minds behind loofah want to hear, but dear God, do I want to see what the ending of Fallen Sun is going to amount to. Come on, man, you literally just enlisted loofah into the fucking Avengers or something. Where the hell does that go? Quickly, before Dermot Crowley gets too old. What on earth are you guys going to do? We're not talking about loofah. Today's body on the slab was a more one-and-done kind of thing. What we are going to be discussing is something with a very definite vision. I mean, look at this B-roll. Is that actually a visual style? Does this programme not look like every other bloody dour crime drama with a grey colour palette? I know, basic level artistry. It's a thing you can do on a BBC budget. Wild, eh? When something breaks out from the crowd, I find it important to highlight and analyse it, to see why it makes you look up from your phone. So let's cut to the chase and look at 2011's The Shadow Line.
Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you.
We'll blitz through the context because there's not much to talk about here. It's the 2000s, and there's a concerted effort by British TV to try to make the crime drama do something different. There was a consistent trope pre-millennium for the British TV copper. Usually, they were an eccentric, middle-aged detective type, usually with some sort of gimmick aping American television dramas like Columbo and Kojak. More often than not, this gimmick was kind of rubbish. This detective moonlights as an antique dealer. This detective is a chef. This detective is a medieval monk. These detectives are old and decrepit and write the theme tune to their own programme. Sure, you had The Bill, which had been airing since the 80s, claiming to show day-to-day police officer life, but that treated its subject as more of a soap opera, less about the crime and more about the coppers. All three major stations were jockeying to try and find the right key that fit that lock. I mean, hell, the Comic Strip Presents was taking the piss out of this kind of thing while the programmes were still airing. This is not a hindsight thing. The 2000s was a definite turning point here. If I had to point a finger, I'd say Life on Mars at least heavily contributed to this change. Sam Tyler was at the time, contemporary police officer, beholden to modern policing standards, but he was dropped into the wacky fantasy world of the 1970s. Tyler was actually a relatively new idea, surprisingly enough. A copper that doesn't have a gimmick. He's an actual police officer. Realising that people would be happy to watch a regular detective if the mystery was interesting enough seemed to actually startle the slow-moving Goliaths of British television. More realistic, gritty coppers started invading the airwaves. These detectives didn't have gimmicks, they had neuroses, which are gimmicks for adults. Enter Hugo Blick. Hugo had a strange media background at the start of the 2010s. He was mostly known for writing and producing comedy, being the co-creator and writer for cult classics like Marion and Jeff, and producing heart-wrenching glumcob Roger and Val Have Just Got In. Oh, and he played the young version of the Jack Nicholson Joker in the Tim Burton Batman film? You know, the Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight guy? I think that factoid is going to turn out to be more important than it appears to be right now. Blick did have some serious work under his belt, and his show Operation Good Guys was a mockumentary focusing on a police unit, so cops and robbers wasn't entirely new territory to the man. And so, Hugo created The Shadow Line for the BBC in 2011. It's a very different feeling beast with the trappings of a police procedural, but it actually borrows a lot more from American film noir. Now would be a good time for you at home to acquire a copy of The Shadowline and watch it for yourself. I'm sorry to come over all watch with Mother, but it's a very complex programme with a lot of moving parts for its piddly 7 episodes. Plus, what's actually going on can be quite hard to fathom. It's all skullduggery and secrets, so I'll just assume you've done that and we can move on. Now, the colour red is an... Wait, what? You have no idea what you just watched? It's too much mumbling in corridors and flowery language. Alright? No fear. Don't say I don't do anything for you. You want this show explained like a Watch Mojo video? Don't worry. Let's solve this like a real gritty British copper. Right! Get me a cup of tea, a strobe light that's clearly a week from conking out, and a green, optimistic deputy that I can grind down with my world-weary cynicism. Let's have some fun.
Jump in the line, rock your body on time. Okay, I believe you.
You, want to see the board? Bam! Look at her! Ain't she lovely? Took me a whole day to kit bash this together on paint.net. We're going to do a quick lightning round of all the players so that you have a cheat sheet on who's doing what here.
Harvey Ratton.
Dead. The inciting incident. Drug smuggling crime lord found shot in the eyeball at the start of the show. Was just released from prison on a royal pardon. Why was he released? It's a secret. Shh.
Jonah Gabriel.
Our main character. Detective put on the Harvey Ratton case. Just got back onto the force of taking a bullet in the head on an operation that killed his partner. Has some memory lost. Has a secret case of money at home with no idea where it came from. Also has a mistress and a kid behind his wife's back. So, maybe not the best guy. Or maybe he is. We don't know. He doesn't know. Mystery is the spice of life.
May I ask why you're buying up all the great-for-baby items?
I'd prefer that you didn't.
Joseph Bede.
Technical head of the Ratton mob now that Harvey's had the Martok special. Joseph isn't really a criminal. His setup is supposed to be entirely above board and legal. He's more of a frontman and a mobster. But he needs the drug operation to continue to get money for his dying wife's Alzheimer's. He'd rather be selling flowers and apples than dealing with thugs and drug pushers, but he's here now and he has to make the most of it.
J. Ratton.
Harvey's shit-heel loose cannon nephew. Likes violence. Acts like a giggling schoolboy. Easy to piss off. Has to be followed around by an old man to stop him eating the skirting boards or taking a shit in the flowers. Was in prison with his uncle, but also let out on that royal pardon.
Peter Glickman.
Missing in action. Harvey Ratton's business partner in the drug running. Should have taken over things when Harvey did his Jakar impression, but he hasn't been seen in a while. Seems to have legged it.
Richard Patterson.
Detective Gabriel's superintendent. Wanted Gabriel on this case despite the higher-ups trying to get him quietly shuttled off. Believes Jonah can get to the bottom of this mystery. Can't smoke in the office, so he gnaws on pencils like a chipmunk.
Leah Honey.
Gabriel's new partner. A little worried because the last person in her shoes got their brains turned into bolognese. Can kick a bit of arse when required.
James Gatehouse.
There will be an entire section of this video on Gatehouse. This video was so close to just being about Gatehouse. For now, he's a mysterious element of the criminal underworld. He's here to tie up some loose ends.
Andy Dixon.
Harvey Ratton's driver the night Harvey became the big boss. Legged it once it happened. Everyone wants to talk to Andy, and everyone is leaning on his girlfriend and mother in order to do so.
David Kokar.
Gabriel's boss's boss. Doesn't want Gabriel on the case. Reckons Gabriel was faking his amnesia. Is he right to suspect Gabriel was involved in dodgy dealings, or is he perhaps involved in something nasty too?
Morris Crace.
The old bloke whose job it is to follow J. Ratton around to make sure he doesn't kill the wrong person. Acts like an idiot, but you don't get old in the criminal underworld without being able to hold your own. Think Mike Ehrmantraut.
Bob Harris.
Enemy of Harvey Ratton and rival British gang lord. Had more than a few reasons to rub Harvey out. Joseph is going to sell the drugs from the Ratton operation onto him as he's desperate for any buyer. Also, he's gay. It's a minor plot point, I'm not just pointing that out to be a prick.
Bulkar Babur.
Turkish drug importer. Cagey now that Harvey's been death-stroked. Relates to Joseph's protectiveness of his family. Kind of. Watches Turkish soap operas on the TV gaffer tape to the driver's side seat in his car.
Ross McGovern.
Investigative reporter who seems to enjoy needling Jonah about the fact someone shot him in the brain. You will hate this guy more than most of the actual criminals just for how smarmy his actor plays him.
Laura Gabriel.
Jonah Gabriel's wife. Doesn't know about the mistress, doesn't know about the love child, doesn't know about the briefcase of money in the wardrobe. Trying for a baby with Jonah after 5 stillbirths.
Julie Bede.
Joseph Bede's wife. Rapidly declining in health due to early onset Alzheimer's. Actually, just a really sad aspect of the story, to the point I feel it would be in poor taste to a fictional character to make a joke about it. So, moving right along.
Emile Foley.
The most obviously corrupt police officer in television history. Just a straight-up slimiest guy. Was the reporting officer on Harvey Ratten's Odin imitation, but is still hanging around the plot, getting bribed by criminals long after he should have moved on to other things.
Robert Beatty.
A little minor spoiler here. Undercover customs officer who was instrumental for getting the Rattens put in prison. Working in such secrecy that Gabriel and Honey didn't have any idea what he was doing lurking around Harvey Ratten's funeral.
Petra Mailer.
Peter Glickman's mistress. She's also keen to find out where the man who paid her bills has gone, and she approaches Joseph Bede for help. Perhaps a little too much help.
Delaney.
Gabriel's old partner. He and Gabriel got shot on some sort of undercover operation no one knows about, and Gabriel can't recall, but at least Gabriel gets to not recall. Delaney didn't survive his shot.
Commander Penny.
Retired police commissioner. Spends his retirement in a perpetual state of sailing his boat and preparing his boat to sail like he's in some sort of boat-based purgatory.
Sir Richard Halton.
An old MI5 agent who nestled himself comfortably in the UK's top brass. Wait, did I say MI5? Shit, that's a spoiler.
Ratalac.
Bob Harris's chief minion. Good with numbers, ambitious. Also acts as a rent boy and has been having sex with Bob Harris. That's the other side of that minor plot point that I was talking about. Now I read it out loud, it does sound kind of bad, doesn't it? Moving even further along, number 4. Oh, wait, that's it. Apart from some extreme minors who are more plot devices than characters. Well, that's the board. We're here to solve the murder of Harvey Ratten. We've got a lot of potential culprits and there's a whiff of conspiracy in the air. Think you figured it out yet? Well, here's your last jumping off point if you want to find out for yourself, because I'm going to unravel the whole thing for you in the next part. So if you're planning on watching The Shadow Line, now's your opportunity. Hey, they gave Jonah one last chance to duck out before everyone went to shit.
Sure you want to do this?
I thought I'd extend the same courtesy to you. The Shadow Line has a lot of moving parts crammed into its 7 episodes, so I'm just going to lay it all out on the table for you, working backwards. If you are a clever smart boy and think you've got the whole show figured out, then skip to this timestamp and go straight to the analysis and symbolism talk. Otherwise, let's walk the line backwards like Johnny Cash, but an evil Johnny Cash.
Jump in the line, rock your body on time. Okay, I believe you.
So, let's talk counterpoint. In 1979, a police commissioner called Paul Travis, who we never see in the show as he seems to have died long ago due to cancer, sets up a secret operation unit inside the police called Counterpoint. Travis headed this group with 2 individuals, David Coker and Richard Halton, with Coker supplying the money and Halton supplying the operatives. Coker ran the police angle alongside a few close allies like Commander Penny, while Sir Richard Halton was an operative inside MI5 who was able to supply Counterpoint with agents like Gatehouse. Counterpoint was involved in trying to shut down money laundering, making dirty money clean. They started small, with Gatehouse running the field operations and making contacts in England's criminal underworld. But slowly, Gatehouse and his flunkies were so ingratiated into the British drug smuggling business, they were capable of being in the right position to activate the sting and bring down a huge chunk of the operation. The number £70 million gets thrown around. Coker and Halton wanted to spring their trap, so they took their little setup to the higher authorities, but at this time, the British legal system was starting to become wary of a little thing known as entrapment. Counterpoint was seen as one big entrapment, as the money flowing into it was coming from the government itself. Coker and Halton were ordered to shut the whole thing down and forget about it. Counterpoint, though, didn't shut down. There was too much money on the table, so Gatehouse carried out that $70 million deal, with the cash going straight into the police pension fund of all things. And now, with a highly successful criminal enterprise in operation, Counterpoint kept on counterpointing. Only now, they wanted an even bigger slice of the pie. This is where Gatehouse contacts Peter Glickman to make him his operative. Glickman then contacts Harvey Ratten to set up the drug smuggling ring we see in the show. At this point, Ratten doesn't know about Gatehouse, and he certainly doesn't know Counterpoint is a joint Metropolitan Police / MI5 sting. There's enough distance now made that the low levels have no clue that the higher-ups even exist. It's this big Matryoshka doll of crime. And it works very well. Counterpoint funds itself off the drug profits, and the money is cleaned by funneling it through the police pension fund. Things were going swimmingly for 30 years until Glickman suddenly realises that he might be on the wrong side of history. Gatehouse was trying to push Harvey Ratten out of the picture by offering him his own retirement fund, but Ratten wanted to stay in the game. Harvey and his nephew get carted off to the slammer, orchestrated by Gatehouse, but then Glickman goes and tells Harvey about Counterpoint, and then babbling about Counterpoint is what Harvey uses to threaten the conspirators with to get that royal pardon that gets him out of prison. But they can't just hand out royal pardons willy-nilly. Harvey has to have done something on paper to warrant that pardon. So the crew sets up a drugs bust. Kokar and Penny give Gatehouse money to buy drugs to give to customs, claiming the drugs came from a tip-off given by Harvey Ratton. That's what Gabriel and his partner Delaney are doing when Delaney gets killed and Jonah gets his second crown chakra. Gatehouse shoots them with the dirty money in their possession so that they can get framed as dirty coppers, and the money can legally wind up in police custody so that Coker and Penny can use it in the drug deal. This is why the money is marked twice. It was only supposed to get processed once, but at this point Penny is getting wary of Gatehouse acting as his own little secret service. So if Gatehouse turns out to be setting up these deals for himself so he can take the dosh and scarper, the marked money means that if he ever tries to spend any of it, the police will know and immediately pick him up. The problem is, Penny is wrong. Gatehouse isn't going to make bank and boogie off to the Caymans. In 30 years, Gatehouse has started to like being the spider in the web. It's not about police pension funds for Grandpa anymore, no. Grandpa likes being the one in control. Gatehouse views Harvey Ratton's acting out as a threat to his enterprise. That's why he kills him. Jay Ratton, on the other hand, who's still oblivious about Counterpoint, makes for a much better minion. And Jay's so reckless and ambitious, he's the one who tells Gatehouse exactly where his uncle will be to kill him. Jay thinks he's been a right clever little bastard. Look at him, so smug. But all he's actually done is get himself placed as the new Harvey. And now, Gatehouse has an even tighter grip on the English criminal underworld. See, Bob Harris was Harvey Ratton's old enemy and a bit of a thorn in the operations side. But Gatehouse has had a minion in Harris's camp for a while, the Lilac kid. Lilac been getting closer and closer to Bob. Almost too close, actually. Far too close. And by that I mean close enough that Lilac can have Bob bumped off. Now Lilac, who's getting funded by Gatehouse, can buy drugs from the Ratton mob, controlled by Gatehouse, with all the money coming from the commercial sale of drugs folding back to Lilac, Ratton and Gatehouse. But all that's what's happening at the end of the show. At the start of the show, it's Kokar and Halton trying to shut everything down quietly so things don't wrap back to them. Glickman is in hiding because Gatehouse has made it crystal clear he's not taken too kindly to snitches, and Joseph Bede is left holding the bag of a sick wife and half a drug smuggling business, trying to make things work. All the while, Gatehouse chews his way through the cast, tying up loose ends of his loose end tire-upper. The only true wrench in this plan is Jonah and his amnesia. If Jonah had died, then everything would have wrapped up nicely for the bad guys, and if Jonah had full memory of what had happened, then the House of Cards would have toppled in seconds, and he'd been in a much better position to put the pieces together. All this, by the way, is mostly revealed in a 5-minute scene in the final episode. A scene it took me about 8 watch-throughs just to make sure I caught all the bits and pieces and fitted them into the narrative properly. And you want to know the worst part? It's a total Gatehouse victory. Despite getting a few bullets from Peter Glickman in a trap set by Glickman and Jonah, Gatehouse walks away unscathed. Gatehouse kills Halton. He kills Kokar. Early on, Ross McGovern, that investigative reporter, seems like he might be on the right track to uncover the conspiracy, but he gets totaled unceremoniously in episode 4. The one ray of hope, where customs cop Robert Beatty aligns with Gabriel to maybe bring down the Bede operation through an informant of an informant, gets completely wrecked when the informant has a crisis of faith and warns Bede that a raid is coming. Joseph Bede loses his wife to Alzheimer's, then loses his own life to Jay Ratton, despite his operation actually going off without a hitch in a very cruel irony. But maybe Jonah makes it out. Maybe frightened into silence, but at least he can live. His love child got killed in the crossfire when Glickman and Gatehouse had their standoff, so surely he suffered enough. He has a baby on the way and... Yeah, I'm not sure how long Gatehouse has had Jonah's new partner, Honey, in his pocket, but the fact she's been training with her rifle suggests Gabriel's had a target on his back just in case he's remembered too much for a while now. Even though Jonah's baby does get born, we get this utterly frightening scene. We never truly get a full read on Patterson, Jonah's immediate superior officer, but there's no good outcome here. See, Patterson could have just been a good cop, suspicious of Kokar, and his suspicions get proven right when Kokar is revealed to be involved with all the counterpoint stuff. He does push Jonah to follow his instincts and chase up the crime, right up until the point Kokar is ousted and Patterson swoops into his spot. But then he tells Jonah to drop it, and early on he does drop a line about Jonah thinking of his pension before investigating the Ratton murder. In the end, though, even if Patterson is utterly unaware of the continuation or even existence of Counterpoint, he functions in Kokar's role all the same. And then there he is, standing by Jonah's wife's bedside, newborn in her arms, and he salutes it. making it clear that the child's every need will be met by the generous payout of the police pension fund. It's grim. So bloody grim, you know? It's actually refreshing to see something so unabashedly dour. Usually there's something, one small bittersweet victory in these things, but nope, fuck you, it's as bad as you think it is. But is that all the Shadowline has got to say? A tense mystery thriller with a bloody end? Possibly. Certainly there's enough of that to carry you through the 7 episodes and be enthralled. But my eyes can't help but catch clues that flicker and shimmy in the headlights of a Vauxhall Astra. Hey, it's a detective show. Let's do some bloody detecting.
Ollie, Collie, Hinny, Terry, get on to our editor. Glenn, book a room. Bully, Doyle, you go round the back. At times of stress, I make jokes.
Jump in the line, rock your body and time. Okay, I believe you.
So, you've probably noticed that everything's red. It's like a giallo film out here. Red is an almost pervasive force throughout the Shadowline. In fact, the show could have almost been a film noir if it wasn't for the startling red washes over certain scenes. The colour red is even present in dialogue. In one episode, apropos of nothing, 2 characters reference the British football club Arsenal, who are often referred to as the Reds due to their red uniforms.
Man with an estimated annual turnover of 200 million.
About the same as Arsenal Football Club.
And then, in a completely separate scene referring to a separate thing, they're referred to again.
Were you going to get an answer to anything today? Or?
Well, I'd certainly put a fiver on Arsenal for the weekend.
They could have picked any other football club. They could have only mentioned them once, but instead they are mentioned in the same episode in lines of dialogue, otherwise unrelated. But this is more than a directorial choice. Red is important because, like red usually means, it's a warning. Dots and circles of red usually suggest something violent or chaotic is about to happen. For example, early on, Jay Ratton is brooding about his uncle's death, then winds up kicking 10 bells out of a random heavy who decided it would be a great idea to taunt the Tuco Salamanca of this series. But just before the kicking happens, we get this stark, shadowy shot where the only colour is this tiny red dot from what I think is a charger or a smoke alarm. Red dots are explicitly what we need to look out for. Sometimes it's a reflection on a car headlight, sometimes it's a sight on a gun, but it always tells you mayhem is coming. Hell, even the opening title will show a stylised eye that's blood red that gets a bullet shot through it, which is a triple symbol. That's what we call a jackpot in the film analysis business. Oh yeah, I love gambling! This is a reference to how Harvey Ratton was killed. It's emblematic of Jonah getting shot in the head, and it's also how Joseph Bede dies in the end. I'm taking the prize money home, baby! It can be quite hard to spot the red dots in certain scenes, but they are always there. At the midpoint of the show, Peter Glickman gets spotted by some loudmouth Yankee while he's hiding from Gatehouse in Ireland. In order to keep his secret, Glickman reluctantly resolves to kill the man. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be any red dots leading up to this murder, but just as Glickman gets the tourist in his hotel room, right on the table between them is a bowl of red apples. Apples are also a minor symbol in the Shadowline. It helps that Joseph Bede's front is a fruit and veg importer. In the first episode, Bede offers Bent Copper Foley an apple for giving him the information on the death of Harvey Ratton before the police get it. But later on, when trying to get Julie to remember some words to see how far along her Alzheimer's has progressed, the word she's asked to remember is apple. The other side of Bede's front business, flowers, are also omnipresent in so many scenes. Sometimes, as roses, they are the aforementioned red dot warning of bloodshed to come, but sometimes they're just there. I'm afraid I'm not well versed in the language of flowers, but flowers are how Bede transports the drugs into the country. He hides them in arum lilies. Now, from my research, that's a very interesting choice, because typically these are the lilies you see at weddings, and they are supposed to represent rebirth. They are associated with Easter too, which is again a celebration of rebirth of our Lord Jesus Christ. This might symbolise the purity of the reason why Bede is doing all this. It's a dirty deal, but he's only doing it because he loves his wife and wants to give her the best care. But sometimes the arum lily is referred to as the death lily. Well, for one to be reborn, one must first die. The Irish wear them to mourn the deaths of Irish Republicans, and they can often be seen at their funerals. The plot also gives us a couple of connections to Ireland. Peter Glickman hides out there when he's hiding from Gatehouse, and Robert Beatty checks his cars for bombs after dealing with the IRA. Not only are these death lilies being used to smuggle heroin, their vendor, Joseph, winds up dead despite the successful nature of the operation. And on top of all of that, arum lilies have a reputation for being incredibly invasive and are also pretty toxic, but some lunatics have taken to cooking and eating the leaves. Another metaphor for heroin if I've ever seen one. It's actually a really ingenious way to get across the damage the Rattan operation is doing. I'm guessing the BBC in the 2000s were dead against actually showing the real consequences of heroin use, so instead Blick has shown it using a symbol. There's plenty of other flowers throughout the show used in key talking scenes, and there's probably some meaning you could rationalise out of them whenever they pop up, but the arum lilies are the most prominent and they're directly named. In fact, I'm not sure how you would smuggle heroin in arum lilies. Surely the powder would just fall out the top. So I'm told. I wouldn't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
No thanks, I don't use the horse.
There's a bunch of really interesting symbols that only make sense once you've watched the whole programme too. Going back to that scene where Jay Rattan gives that heavier drubbing, just as he gets the phone call about his uncle's death, we see him standing under a Union Jack flag fluttering in the wind. At first, we can infer this links to the royal pardon Jay just got, but if you couple this with the knowledge that Jay actually led Gatehouse to Harvey in order to get him killed, and his oddly military-style coat, then technically we can see Jay as an agent of the British government, who's working with the British spy master to take out a potential threat to an undercover Secret Service operation. Now the image of him standing with a flag at his back isn't ironic, it's literal in a really fucked up way. And let's not even get started on how the death that sets off the programme, the wound that starts Jonah off on this mystery, and the death of the deuteragonist all mirror each other, like they're parallels or something. We'll get to that. But first, we need to talk about someone very important. Someone who's knocking at the door.
Jump in the line, rock your body, child!
I've got to be honest, early versions of this video were Gatehouse fan cams. I love this character. This vicious old codger is the spider in the web, and he kicks a lot of arse to prove it. A lot of the symbolism we've just discussed truly emanates off Gatehouse in an almost supernatural way. Let's look at the flowers. In the scene where Gatehouse is talking to Andy Dixon's mother, he has a vase full of what looks like roses positioned behind him. Little red dots? Almost certainly. But what I find interesting is that there's a following scene where Jay Rattan intimidates Dixon's mother, and that's set up almost in the exact same way, with the two sat in the same chairs. Except for Jay's version of the scene, he's explicitly framed so as to not get those roses shot behind him. And in following scenes showing that room, the roses seem to be gone, and I'm pretty sure Mrs. Dixon had other priorities than feng shui. Guess who kills Mrs. Dixon? If you guessed Jay Rattan, pay attention. If you guessed Paulie Galtieri, then you're in the wrong video. That one was a while back. Keep up. Sure, red dots appear when someone is going to die, but they follow Gatehouse around. He's often framed to have that red light directly behind him. Sure, the other gangsters commit violence, but blood and chaos follows in Gatehouse's footsteps. Before he kills Andy Dixon and his pregnant girlfriend, she's making a big pot of tomato soup, again eerily foretelling the coming of Grandpa Murder. But when he's trying to find out the location of Glickman, Gatehouse threatens Glickman's daughter and granddaughter. Before Gatehouse appears, she's cooking a big pan of bolognese. I love this particular bit because you've already been Pavloved into thinking a big pot of red goo means a child is going to die. You've been primed for it. You know, Gatehouse isn't pissing around. He's gonna fucking do it. Fortunately, it's all part of a cunning Gatehouse plot to get Glickman's kids to contact him so he can trace Glickman's location through the phone networks. Gatehouse never kills Glickman's granddaughter, and I think symbolically they do try to show you this particular eventuality won't happen, because we get an otherwise unnecessary shot of the bolognese getting burnt, turning that bright red disc into a blackened mass. There is no reason to believe that anything supernatural is happening in the shadow line. You're probably thinking that's a pretty odd sentence to say in the middle of what seems to be another point about something else, and you're right. But while Gatehouse might not be supernatural, by God do they want you to think he is. After Gatehouse is shot, we're told that
Apparently he's got the heartbeat of a 20-year-old.
It's brushed off with a joke, but then we see Gatehouse kill an attempted assassin, easily overpowering her despite still having 2 fresh bullet wounds and being hooked up to medical machinery. Then he's just wandering around like nothing happened. He seemed more injured by the bomb at Glickman's Irish clock workshop, and even then he barely got scratched. There's repeated shots of Gatehouse through doors where his trademark trilby gives him horns. Coupled with the red lighting, it looks like the devil is at the door. I mean, maybe there's something religious going on? A big theme of the shadow line is good, evil, and the murky spot in between that everyone really falls into. But Jonah Gabriel is an almost horrendously on-the-nose name if that's the case. The Archangel Gabriel is, of course, the messenger of God, but this Gabriel is nowhere near perfect like an angel should be. There's the cheating on his wife, the secret love child, the way he freezes people like honey away from him. But he does wind up in conflict against Gatehouse, which he loses. Badly. Angels aren't supposed to do that. Maybe it's in Jonah, the bloke who wound up living in a whale, a man stuck inside something bigger than himself and he can't get out. I don't know. The names may just be to emulate the hard-boiled film noir detective story the Shadowline is riffing off. I mean, Bede's a funny last name, possibly linking back to the Venerable Bede, a historical figure who wrote one of the most impactful accounts of English history, but I'm not sure how that lines up with the rest of the plot. I usually put a lot of stock in names, because it's how writers themselves tend to initially interpret their characters. It's a first port of call mentally, but here we have the inheritors of the British criminal underworld being a Ratton and a Ratalac. Honestly, I think Hugo Blick just used names that sounded cool. Fair play, really. Looping back to Gatehouse, at the start of the first 3 episodes, there's a really interesting through line you can spot if you're paying attention. Each of the first 3 episodes, in the first 5 minutes, will have a character do a finger gun motion, always in reference to the death of Harvey Ratton. Each episode, always early on, usually given camera focus, a fake gun, in the same way you would pretend to shoot someone if you were playing around. I think this is supposed to be a clue into how Harvey Ratton's death is not the real crime here, merely the surface level. This hand sign, only appearing in the first 3 episodes, is supposed to warn you that something isn't right. This isn't just a gangland shooting. Episode 3 is where we first reveal that Gatehouse is probably going to be the main antagonist of the Shadowline. It's where he kills Andy Dixon and his girlfriend, but notably, when shooting Andy, he uses a silenced pistol. But unlike those mock guns, he holds it upside down. Now, just as I'm not a drugs baron or a florist, I'm not a trained killer, so I don't know if there's a benefit to shooting someone with an upside down gun, but I would think it would only help towards making it harder to pull the trigger, what with you now using your pinky. What's more, the last time we saw the finger guns, it was when Andy Dixon was telling Jay Ratton what he heard the night of Harvey Ratton's death. And on that table where they're having this meeting for seemingly no reason, a game of Battleship is set up. I highly doubt Jay and Andy were having a cheeky game before getting down to business, but you've got to remember who these characters are. At this point, Andy has totally thrown his lot in with Gatehouse. Gatehouse seems to have protected him when the police and the Ratton mob were after him. Andy has been instructed by Gatehouse to tell Jay what he heard, but explicitly not to say what he saw. Andy is basically a puppet for Gatehouse in this scene. But he's talking to Jay Ratton, who uses the information Andy gives him to frighten Bob Harris out of the drug deal, as Andy fits up Bob Harris in his confession. But Jay knows it was Gatehouse, remember? He gave Gatehouse the location of where Harvey would be. This scene is a Gatehouse henchman talking to another Gatehouse henchman. That's where the battleship comes in. It's play fighting, a man playing against himself. No one's at the table but the game's set up. It's all symbolic. The real crime isn't a man pointing a gun at another man's head. The stakes are far grander, perhaps even more so than the government conspiracy for getting better police pensions.
Somebody help me!
Parallels. The Shadowline wants you to know that both sides of the law are riddled with parallels. Joseph Bede and Jonah Gabriel's offices are black and white respectively, and are set out to mirror each other. Richard Patterson can't smoke in the office, so he's often seen gnawing on pencils as a substitute. He doesn't want to quit, but he's being forced to. Bob Harris wants to quit smoking, so every time we see him, he's chewing on nicotine gum. He's trying to quit, but his body's not allowing him to. That dodgy copper Foley is always chewing something whenever we see him. He's playing both sides off against each other, but he's chewing because he wants to. Meanwhile, he takes one bite of Bede's offered apple and he spits it out, saying it's too tart. He's one of the few non-Gatehouse-aligned characters who pretty much gets away with it. Sure, Foley gets a kicking in this scene, but verbally, he wins this encounter, not the good cop in a bad place Beatty. Beatty, by the way, is introduced to us by Gabriel and Honey thinking he was a criminal involved in the Ratton mob, not an undercover copper. In this scene where Beatty gives Foley a kicking, Foley is so confident he's going to be fine that when another police officer looks over to find out what's going on, despite Beatty showing off his badge, the new copper only leaves when Foley shows his. Lines of dialogue and concepts have an odd habit of appearing in other characters' mouths even when they shouldn't know the other party. This is true all the way back in the first episode. Foley makes a grim remark upon finding Harvey Ratton's body that he should have looked after his teeth.
You should have taken better care of your teeth.
Then, Weirdly, in another scene, Julie Bede notes,
Doesn't she have funny teeth? Why would they give a job to a woman like that?
when remarking on a news reporter's appearance, this seems to be a complete coincidence. This parallel is really clear with Jonah and Joseph's wives. Ignoring the obvious faithful and the faithless, Jonah can't have a child with his actual wife. They've tried 5 times, so it's a miracle Laura can actually get pregnant during the course of the show, let alone actually give birth. Meanwhile, Jonah does have his side piece he's keeping from Laura with a son. And Jonah had this affair long before he was shot. He can't remember why he was shot or the circumstances of his original investigation, but he remembers his secret family. Jonah loses his son to the investigation he looped them into. He used his mistress and his son as bait for Gatehouse, and he paid a terrible price for it. No matter which way you scrub it, Jonah's actions lead him to be unfaithful, and Jonah's actions lost him his son. On Bede's side, though, he's losing his wife through no fault of his own. Nature, or God, said it's time for Joseph and Julie to suffer. We see Joseph try to cling on to what's left of his wife, even when she knows that there's no future. She begs him to let her go in the end. And eventually it's all for naught. Losing his wife loses Joseph his will to live. Morris gives Joseph a gun to defend himself against Jay Ratton when the boy wants to start cleaning up loose ends, and Joseph takes it intending on using it. Whether Joseph could have won that fight is unlikely, but after losing Julie, Joseph, by choice, does not take the gun with him into that final car ride with Jay. In summation, Jonah's secret winds up with his first son dead, himself dead, his wife widowed, and his second son without a father. While the reason Joseph honestly tells everyone why he's doing the things he's doing winds up with him being unable to care for his wife and just as dead as Harvey Ratton. I don't think Joseph lies once during the entire Shadowline. He's painfully honest with everybody he meets. In the end, it doesn't help him. Jonah, on paper, is a bad man doing good things. Joseph, on paper, is a good man doing bad things. The reality is far more complicated, but that's how they're going to both be remembered. But do you know who does win? The bastards playing all the sides. Those who can spin all the plates. Those who don't let morality stand in the way of their advancement. There's a lot of film noir shots in the Shadowline. Shots with bright white lights sending the characters into silhouette. Shots in moody shadows. But the violence and bloodshed isn't black and white. It's red. Stark red. The colour that cuts between the two. That's the Shadowline. The Shadowline, I think, is trying to tell us that the world really doesn't care about our morality. What we see as good and evil aren't distinguishable on a cosmic scale. This can be seen as a rejection of religion, a discussion on personal agency, a great throwing up of hands on the idea that you can somewhat charter your own fate. I'm not sure about any of that. I think it's just a tragedy. You see, Gatehouse doesn't survive his gunshots through his not inconsiderable will. It's luck. It's total happenstance Glickman wasn't able to finish the job because Jonah's kid's head got in the way of the bullet. The bomb in the clock shop should have killed Gatehouse. It doesn't. It's luck. In fact, Gatehouse can be seen rattled by it. Glickman makes a point about calling him
Human, after all.
If Gatehouse is a demon, then he's a human demon. In fact, do you know who he reminds me of? Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now, or Heart of Darkness if you've watched the Wendigoon video and are pretending to have read it in the comments. Because it's the same story. Government operative is placed in hostile territory, and instead of doing his mission, some circumstance caused by the organisation that put him there leaves him ultimately aimless amongst the enemy. So they use their skills, feeling slighted by the people who put them there, to basically take over the enemy, using the talents they've been trained with to appear as an almost biblical figure. But, like Kurtz, Gatehouse is still human, a monster born of man. Brando's Kurtz may have been an almost godlike vigour to the Vietnamese, but he's actually a muttering drug addict propped up by his minions. Book Kurtz isn't even that. We only see him delirious and babbling, twisted by his experiences, but still those beneath him are unfailingly loyal to him through his reputation. Gatehouse is as addicted to control as both Kurtz is, and his human failings are where that control blinds him. But unlike Kurtz, Gatehouse wins. He takes his knocks, he bleeds, but he wins. Counterpoint continues. Money still flows from drugs to pensions. Despite minions like Honey, Ratton and Rattleack being far younger than he is, they still talk to him like he's going to be a threat in 40 years' time to do the whole thing over again. With a total Gatehouse victory, we get this suggestion that while Gatehouse came from mortal flesh, he's actually become something bigger than himself, or at least he embodies it. This has become that Gatehouse fan cam I knew it would. I can't stress enough how cool I find Gatehouse. Like, I know I shouldn't, he kills a pregnant woman, but good God, some of the shit he pulls off. Watch the Shadow Line just for Gatehouse alone. To wrap up, the Shadow Line is about good and evil, but it's not about choosing to be good or evil. These concepts are so much bigger than us. We can do bad for good and good for bad. It's our justifications that are what guides us. And truthfully, we can justify anything if we try hard enough, or have enough reason to. You didn't think it was going to end with an uplifting message, did you? Be careful about what you can convince yourself to do. You can have all the good reasons in the world, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. After all, we're only human. Very small, and there's an awful lot of us. There can always be someone else who can fill your shoes. Also, little coda. They hint at Gatehouse's secret service around the middle of the series by having his locker in the train station be 007. I just think that's cute. They flash it up for like a second. It's like when you see a coffee cup and donuts modelled in the original Doom. Gatehouse is such a cutie pie.